I'm going to record on this computer. Okay. It says it's recording.
Perfect. All right. So if you could introduce yourself, your position, and give us your location.
My name is Bry Roskoz. I am the president of EF Ultimate Break, which is a subsidiary of EF Education First. And we are headquartered in Boston.
Awesome. All right. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Tourism and Hospitality Management Program.
Okay.
It offers at MTSU the chance to join one of the biggest and fastest growing industries with career opportunities in travel and tourism, hotels and restaurants, events, and so much more. MTSU is located in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, which is 30 minutes south of Nashville. We have over 20,000 students and we have several very popular majors. Um, so, what you already said what your current position is. What does it entail for you?
So we run the business I run is a group travel business for 18 to 29-year-olds. And so we take folks, yeah, internationally, and we plan all of the logistics, everything from flights to on the ground transportation to tour directors to setting up amazing experiences and yeah, ensuring everybody has a great time.
Okay. How did you get to where you are today? Was it jobs, networking, um, lots of interviews? Did you build up to this position?
So I've been at EF for 6 years. I've been in this job for a little over 5. I started as chief of staff, working with our head of North America, which is mostly tours, but other businesses such as an au pair program, high school exchange year program. But I worked with him across all of our businesses, heading up our central HR team, central branding team, and PR, and then doing like special projects. And so, and about 6 months into that job, my job was to find somebody to backfill my predecessor in Ultimate Break. It was called College Break at the time. And we looked around at a lot of different folks internally, and nobody worked out for a whole bunch of reasons. And this was dragging on and on and on. And I went to my boss and said, I know my job is to find you the next head of College Break, but it seems to me that you're looking for somebody who's run a business before and who has e-commerce experience, and I have both of those. So if you think that I would be of better use to EF running College Break, I'm happy to talk about that. Otherwise, I really love the role I'm in right now. There's a ton for me to do the next few years. I'm not asking to move, but I'm offering, like, if that's what you need me to do, I'm happy to talk about it. And he went away, and about 3 weeks later he came back, and my boss is the son of the founder. So he came back and said, oh, I talked to Bertel, his father, and we think it could be interesting for you to take College Break. Let's talk about it. And so long story short, that's how I wound up in my current role. I wound up in EF as a fluke. I was doing some due diligence in the travel industry. My background before travel is more in retail, apparel, and footwear, and I'm running those businesses. And I was looking at considering making a career change because I love travel. I've lived outside the U.S. a couple of times, and so I was just exploring what the travel industry was about. And I networked my way to somebody who used to work at a consulting firm I worked at a long time ago, just to pick her brain about the industry. And long story short, she was at EF, and long story short, that's how conversations started, and I wound up there.
Okay. And
That's
then,
a long answer. Sorry.
no, perfect. So I remember the story, but for our viewers, for later on, where is like EF based from and like who runs it? Like, how did it begin?
So the EF is, we just celebrated our 55th, we're almost 55th anniversary, actually 56, close to 66, 56, sorry. And it was founded by a gentleman named Bertel Halt, who is Swedish. And the short story is he was dyslexic growing up and he had a really hard time learning English. In college, he spent a summer working in England, and that's how he picked up English. And he kind of scratched his head and said, maybe this is a way that other people can learn languages. And so our first business was language travel. We still have it. It's run out of Europe, but it was taking non-English speaking people to English speaking countries to both travel and learn about the country as well as learn the language. And so since then, yeah, we have over 40,000 people now worldwide. We're one of the biggest companies people haven't heard of, especially in the US. But our biggest businesses are the tours business, which Ultimate Break is part of, the language business, which is not only taking people to travel, but we run language schools all over the world, both primarily for English. Teaching English is the biggest business, but we also teach, French and Spanish, etc. And then we have the cultural exchange programs, which mostly bring non-Americans to the U.S. to do au pair programs or high school exchange year programs.
What was your typical workday like before COVID hit?
Well, I'm a general manager, and so part of what I do is help make sure all of the individual pieces of what it takes to put together and to develop our product, to market it to customers, and to deliver it. Make sure all of those pieces are working together. And so my typical day, I'm sure everybody says there is no typical day, but it's usually a combination of, I spend a lot of time with especially my direct report staff, and then in kind of cross-functional meetings, tethering those pieces kind of together. And we're an e-commerce business, so we move pretty quickly. We're fairly small, even within the EF family, so we move nimbly. So we would try to make a lot of decisions and make them quickly. But in the office, we have an amazing office in Boston, an open floor plan. So for me, what that means is I sit right with our teams that are on the phone with travelers, and so I'm always overhearing traveler conversations, whether they're people thinking about traveling with us or people who've already booked who are calling in for a lot of for questions about their trip. And that's probably one of the things I miss being around our team, but I also miss hearing like what customers are saying, because you get a lot of it helps you do a much better job running the company when you've got that kind of firsthand knowledge.
Yeah. At EF, what do you believe that you guys give to the consumer that other companies do not?
Well, that's an interesting question. Our Ultimate Break business is a little different than most of the other tours businesses. Our business is different because our biggest competitor is actually people your age doing it themselves. It's planning their own trips. It's not, we compete with probably the biggest competitor would be Kentucky, which is an Australian, New Zealand company. They're a little bit more party, like all the time. They're a little more faster pace, as opposed to, we're still a faster pace, but we probably spend a little more time in destinations. But as I said, our biggest competition when people are thinking about traveling is doing it themselves. And I think, I like to joke that all you have to do is show up at your home airport and literally we take care of the rest. And I think, pre-COVID, that was a pretty compelling value proposition for a lot of people. And now during and kind of as we come out of COVID and start traveling again, I think it's even more important because, if I'm traveling, I really don't want to spend time stressing over, is the country open or not? Do I have to wear a mask? Do I have to, what do I need to get into the country? All the little nitty gritty details. And so we take care of that. And, we adjust if on the ground as necessary for if things are closed or we don't think an activity might be safe or whatever, we will adjust. Or if we can't run the tour, we just say, hey, let's rebook you to another time when it's running and able to run and have a great experience. So we kind of take all that stress off the customer so they can just show up at the airport and have a great time.
Yeah, that was definitely very helpful for whenever we went to Costa Rica. Was whenever I was looking for something, I'm like, I don't want to stress about anything. Here's my money. You tell me what I need to do next. What do I
Right.
need to get? Do I need a test? Do I need a mask? Can I go? Can I not go? And it was definitely like very nice to hear that, hey, like we can reschedule you to a totally different trip, because like I was booked for the Dominican and it was like, hey, we got this one available if you want it. Because some companies will be like, okay, until next time when Dominican is open again, that's when you
Right.
can go.
Yeah, we're
Uh,
just yeah, we're just trying to get travelers out on the road. And, I think especially with Europe still being closed, we're trying to get as many of those folks, booked over to Costa Rica. We're hoping to open Ecuador. We have a couple trips running in the US, a national parks trip and a Hawaii trip that we'll be running in May, starting in May. Iceland open to vaccinated travelers. So we have a good number of folks who have been vaccinated and are super excited to sign up for that. So there's definitely a lot of pent up demand, as you know, with a lot of the folks you traveled with who are just like, I don't care, just send me wherever I can go.
do you know how Greece is looking? Is Greece open right now?
Greece is not open right now. They've said that they are looking to open to vaccinated travelers in May, but we don't at the moment have specifics about whether they mean all travelers, whether they mean European only travelers. So we're kind of waiting with bated breath to see what
Okay.
happens in mid-May. So
All
fingers
right.
crossed.
Oh, I
Trust me,
know.
we want to be traveling in Greece. It's one of our top destinations. It's such
Oh,
an
I know.
amazing place.
Oh, I already know. Like as soon as I land, I'm gonna cry because that's been my dream forever. So these next few questions are going to be a little bit more, I guess, more about you.
Okay.
Uh, what got you into travel? Family, friends, personal interests, school?
I I mean, I was fortunate. My parents took me to Europe a couple times when I was in high school or in actually in late elementary school and junior high school. And then I spent a summer in France as an exchange student. But I would say the travel bug hit like really bit me. Before I went back to business school, I took the summer off, and my boyfriend at the time was working in Singapore, and we were supposed to do a road trip around Europe, and clearly because he was in Asia, that wasn't going to happen. So I said, fine, I'm going to get myself on a plane and I'm going to go hang out with you in Singapore for a month, and I'm going to travel around Asia on my own. And I did that and I loved it. In fact, the more unique and kind of different the place, the more I really, really loved it. So, um, it was the first time I had really shown up somewhere and been like the one who sticks out like a sore thumb. Um, and that was a really interesting, like, yeah, personal observation for me to like what that really felt like. So kind of the personal growth about being in an environment so different. And I just like I'm just an internally curious person. And so again, things that are more really different than what I've grown up with or what I've already seen. Um, so that really, yeah, that's where the travel bug really bit. And I came home and I was like, oh my God, that was so amazing. I can't wait to go back to Asia. And I don't have any great desire to live in Asia, but I love traveling to Asia. I've been to a lot of different countries there. I actually just a couple weeks ago, speaking of like pent up travel demand, booked a trip with a friend of mine to go hike to Everest Base Camp in Nepal next April. So I already have plans to go back to Asia.
That's awesome. Like speaking of Singapore, my mom, it's like we lived in Russia, so it was pretty
Yep,
close.
yep.
So like I was a year and a half, and she was like, "Yeah, people were coming up, and they were like, can we take a picture with the little white blonde baby? Because she's the only one in this country that's probably white blonde."
I
And
have
she was like,
I've
"Sure." Why not?
I've had that all over the world. I had that in India. My dad and I was doing a trip with my dad, and we were out traveling, and somebody was like, can I take a picture of you? And I'm like, I'm a tourist. What do you, anyway, but yes.
What is your favorite part about the job? The travel, the people, a mix of everything?
Honestly, I mean, I love the travel, but I mean, number one is the team. I feel so fortunate to work for a great company that has a very a culture it guards very closely, and I think we do a really good job getting to know people during the interview process to figure out who's going to thrive within EF and who might find it frustrating, a frustrating place to work. So, for example, we're not a super structured environment. So if you're somebody who likes structure and you like to know what to do and you like a very specific job description and set of expectations around that, and you want to know, I do this for 2 years and then this will be my next job. And like, we're probably not the best place for you to work, but for somebody who thrives in a less structured environment and, enjoys a level of ambiguity because they then can take ownership and like really have more control over what they want and the path they want, we're a better fit for that kind of person. So that's just one example. I could talk about that forever, but because I've found, like, I work with people who have similar, yeah, kind of working values, if you will, that makes the job just really fun. Plus, I think I have the most fun business because I get to work with my travelers are 18 to 29, and a lot of my team, honestly, is in that age group too. So it keeps me young.
Good. I know you were talking about business school, but what's your educational background?
I went to Smith College, which is a small women's college in the Western Massachusetts, for 4 years. My degree is in econ, and then I worked for 5 years at a software company, and then decided that was not what I want. I never thought that was what I wanted to do with my life, but I was really clear that I really wanted to pivot to something else. I just wasn't sure what that something else was. So I ended up going back to business school at Dartmouth up in New Hampshire for 2 years. And then I came back to Boston after that.
What has been one of the greatest challenges for you on the job prior to COVID? Because that will
Prior
be a
to COVID,
question later. Yeah.
biggest challenges on the job, in the
Would it be
specific job.
promotion?
Sorry?
Would it be maybe like promotion, getting, like, I know your promotion is great, but enticing the people to actually try it?
Yeah, I mean, I think so when I started with College Break, the business was growing really rapidly, very rapidly. And a lot of that was driven by um, being in the right place with the right time for our marketing mix, which was heavily dependent at that time on Facebook advertising. And over time, to your macro point of, how do people find out about us? Um, and then, start getting, and then how do we continue to entice them to book? But I would say how do people even find out about us in the first place is the biggest opportunity we have, and kind of the biggest challenge. And what makes that both hard and interesting is that, even when I go back 5 years, where our customers were heavily on Facebook. In that time, they've moved from Facebook more to Instagram, to TikTok, to Snap. You've got Snapchat, you've got YouTube, and so the number of platforms, and what you need to do to be successful, like the ad you're going to run on, for example, Instagram isn't going to be the same ad you're going to run on TikTok. So it requires a different way of thinking about reaching that customer, than what got the business growing, like right as I took it over. And so it's been fun. I mean, we've still grown tremendously, but it's been more challenging. And also Facebook, just the cost of advertising has also gone up. So the economics of that have changed along it's both more expensive and a more diverse mix of channels.
I will say I loved how you guys made a Hinge profiles for the different
Yep.
countries. That was very funny. Like I really enjoyed reading into those.
We've
Uh,
got a great creative team, and they're all kind of they're all kind of mid to late 20s. Um, and so, yeah, they come up with some amazing ideas. One of my favorite ideas they came up with, I don't know if you saw it, it was a couple of years ago, was Jar of Air, where we did a promotion for St. Patrick's Day where we sold you a jar of air from Ireland and you got a free trip to Ireland with it. So that was our whole like, which was fun. My team actually, I mean, it was funny. I was like, we didn't really do this. Sent jars to one of our Irish tour directors, and he went around and filled them. I'm like, I think we could have just sent some air, and
yeah,
travelers might
everyone
not
would
have
know.
known, with a cute label on it, and call it a day. But anyway, that's the kind of stuff my team is so creatively awesome that they'll do.
That is awesome. I have been considering like doing Ireland for either for New Year's, so kind of like Christmas around that time, or St. Patrick's Day for sure.
Yeah.
That's on my bucket list. Where do you see EF heading in the next 10 years? Or what
Um,
you want in the next 10
but
years?
EF or Ultimate Break? I mean, I
Oh,
think
yeah.
Ultimate Break. Yeah, I think for us, it's really, I mean, our kind of vision is to it's back to that kind of raising brand awareness, and to be known as that, oh, I've got to do my ultimate break trip. I'm graduating from college, or I'm in college, or I've got time off in between jobs. Kentucky in Australia it's kind of like Kleenex. It's like, oh, I'm going to do my Kentucky trip. It's just a thing, a rite of passage, and a thing people do. And so my ambition for Ultimate Break is we become that thing that everybody, who has the means to, can do, does when they're a young adult, to be able to start experiencing the world. Because I think, I won't comment on our current political climate, but one of the things that makes me really proud of what I do is I think we do create empathy with our travel, like getting people out of their comfort zone and getting them to see things. Back to like what sparked my interest in travel in the first place was like being in something that was so different than what I had grown up with. And when I see that in our travelers' eyes, I'm like, oh, I never looked at the world that way, or I never thought about that problem. Even, you were a part of some conversations, having grown up in different, in with a different culture, a cultural background in some ways than a lot of our typical travelers. Like, even the sharing that goes on across travelers opens that empathy. And so for me, when I used to sell, as I said, footwear and apparel for a living, and while that was fun and I love making people feel good about themselves, I really love seeing the personal growth and the fun, but the personal growth that comes out of this business.
Mm-hmm. So these next two questions are going to be more related to kind of like working in a few different positions in the company. Is this a company that requires you to be able to leave and be in another country within 24 hours, or does that depend on the position?
It probably depends on the position. If you're in an operations role, yes, you might have that. If something happened on the ground with a supplier or a tour group and we needed you to go, yes. We Having said that, we have teams literally all around the world, so it would be
Mhm.
unlikely we'd say ask somebody in our Panama office to get on a plane and be in Italy in 24 hours notice. But if you're in our Zurich office, sure, we might actually ask you to get on a plane later that afternoon.
Mhm. Um, will tourism grow more over the next few years once COVID ends?
Yeah, it will. The leisure travel, I definitely think there's a big pent up demand that's going to hit, especially for next year. And we're already seeing hotel suppliers, primarily hotels, because that's what we contract so far in advance. Um, Hotels starting to fill up for next summer. I think the airlines will have a slightly slower rebound, only because they depend so much on business travel, and that will take longer to come back because everybody's learned how to live virtual, operate businesses virtually, the necessity, quote unquote, necessity of business travel. So I do think on the airline side of tourism, there will continue to be more, capacity. It'll be longer to rebuild on the airline side. I think most industry analysts predict overall the travel industry will probably take 3-ish years to get back to where it was. And again, that includes business, but I do think leisure is expected to bounce back much more quickly. And we're already seeing it. I would tell you, we saw a dramatic increase in bookings starting about 6 weeks ago. And it's mostly for next summer, but it's also, you'd be surprised how many people are still, signing up for new trips now for this summer. So.
Mhm. What has been a struggle during COVID, and how have you been able to keep things afloat? Question.
Well, what hasn't been a struggle running a travel business
Yeah.
when you can't travel? I mean, I think the first struggle, probably the two biggest, the first one was, how do you market travel when you can't actually travel? And I do think our team, we were looking back at what we were doing a year ago now. We pivoted pretty hard from a more promotional marketing messaging to really content and inspiration, and not pushing hard for people to book, but just saying just keeping them engaged with the idea of travel. And then over time, I'm assuming probably most customers wouldn't have seen this explicitly, but over time, as the world started kind of picking up, we in small increments ratcheted back up hey, why you should book now, why even booking now, for next summer is a good idea, so you can save, get $21 deposit, you can start saving for your payment plan now. So we kind of ratcheted that messaging up. So I think the pivot and the flexibility of our marketing team. And then number two is just the complexity of restarting travel. Every country is doing, like I mentioned, the complexity that we're taking away from you guys of having to figure it out is, we have to figure out I'll give you a great example. We made the decision to run tours to Ecuador and the Galapagos in late May, and 4 days ago, Ecuador declared I would call it a soft state of emergency, but a state of emergency where they have curfews and other things in place for the next 30 days. And so we'd already messaged travelers, this tour is running. Then do we wait out the 30 days to see, does that go away? Does it continue? So I think the by country, things are constantly changing, and keeping tabs on all of those and figuring out how to message it to a customer, and make sure they're prepared and understand what they're getting themselves into when they say they still want to travel. That's probably the hardest part at the moment.
What has been the biggest perk working for a tourism company?
What has been the biggest, perk?
Perk. Hmm.
Well, I mean, I get to travel. You got to meet me on tour. All of my staff, and it's not just me, but all of our staff usually, and by usually I mean non-COVID, travel on tour once a year. So they all get to go. If you're new to the company, you're going on a tour that has probably a more typical tour. Like Costa Rica would be a pretty popular, very typical tour. The more senior you get, you might get to go to Bali or Thailand or some of the more exotic destinations. And I think the nice thing is, you oftentimes, I didn't with Costa Rica, but you oftentimes have the opportunity to tack on personal travel on the end of the work travel. And so, we've already covered the flights, places, so people get to extend their time and even personalize it for what they want to see. So.
Okay. What is the country that you have noticed that has gained the most popularity recently? I know you said 6 weeks ago, that's when bookings started picking up. Is there one that specifically still stands out?
I mean, I wouldn't say relative maybe to COVID, but the country that stands out for the last year or so is really Japan. There's been a huge, huge increase over the last 2 years in Japan. I think part of it, part of it was the Olympics obviously supposed to happen last year, now happening this year, minus other non-athlete foreigners. Um, and so, but I just think, destinations get trendy for different, sometimes you know why and sometimes you don't. But I would say Japan is the one where we're seeing, especially given the price point, because Japan isn't is an expensive destination. The flights are more expensive than, say, going to Costa Rica, and the land costs are also more expensive. So um, yeah, especially relative to the price point for that tour, we've definitely seen a big increase in interest in Japan.
Okay. And then I got like 3 more questions for you,
Yeah.
so we're all done.
Okay.
What advice do you have for people wanting to get like in the tourism industry or like in your field or working for your company?
Yeah. I mean, I think the I would say, and I would say this to anybody specifically about EF, is um, being flexible how you get in the door, kind of like my experience. I mean, I wasn't accepting a chief of staff job to get in the door to ultimately do something else. I was just really interested in travel. I was interested in the chief of staff role, but I was also open to, like, hey, what other opportunities come? And so I do think there's a getting your foot in the door. It's competitive. It's maybe less competitive at the moment due to COVID, because people are a little nervous and shying away about getting into the travel industry. But jobs are definitely being hired back. We are hiring to backfill some folks who've left over the last year, throughout sales, marketing, customer service, actually pretty much every part of our business. But it generally is competitive. So I would say, figure out what you're good at, get your foot in the door that way, and then be open to raising your hand for new opportunities.
Do you think internships or job experience would be more important to somebody wanting to get into the travel industry?
I think you can do either. I think the thing that I would say about internships is, I interview folks for our team, especially on sales or customer service, which are just the biggest volume new hires we do. And if folks haven't worked in a in a role that's working with the kind of the general public, that's usually not, like, we're usually looking for people who have experience working with the general public, who can deal with all sorts of different types of people. So folks who've done internships in, investment banking, or in consulting, or I worked at my dad's law firm or whatever, like, so I would say it depends what kind of internship. If you're talking about an internship with a travel company, sure. But I also think you can learn the skills that are actually applicable, like, to the actual business. I mean, the last 2 people we hired, um, one who started 3 weeks ago on our sales team. She worked actually in Florence selling trips to college kids who were on their junior year abroad. So completely applicable experience, even though it was like a 6-month, they do them in like 6-month semester increments for those jobs. And then the customer service person who's starting not next week, but the following week, has been doing customer service at FedEx. So if she can handle people who are angry about, missing packages, she can totally deal with our customers.
All right, and then one more question. I remember you telling me this story, but what was the best trip of your life?
The best trip, best ultimate break trip or best trip ever?
Yeah.
Are you talking about Bhutan?
Yes, that
Yes,
one.
my favorite place so far. We'll see if Nepal comes close. My favorite trip so far is Bhutan. It's just, I went there, but before this is how long ago I went there. In the early 2000s, they still didn't have cell phones towers in the country. So I remember having to tell my team, in several jobs ago, like, listen, I'm disappearing for a couple weeks. Like, you literally, there was no Wi-Fi, there was no internet, there was no way to reach me. And so it was just special in that it was so closed off from the rest of the world and felt so untouched. And it's a small Himalayan kingdom nestled in between kind of India, Nepal, and Tibet. And the people are just so genuine, and there at that point was almost no tourism. Like, I remember at the end of our trip wanting to get I use the term souvenir very loosely. I just wanted to buy something. Like, we had heard cows and yaks everywhere, so I was looking for a cowbell to take home. I literally could not find anything to buy. It's the one trip I've come home with nothing to buy because there was nothing. They just have the essentials of what you need to live and work there. But it was magical. It was such a special place.
Okay, well, what about your favorite EF ultimate break
Besides
trip?
yours, of course.
Besides mine, I know
It,
it was amazing. We had the best people. We know.
we had an awesome group. My tie for the most other awesome group, and I think you guys would have really actually. You were both on the like cutting edge of you guys were on the cutting edge of traveling again with COVID. And then my favorite trip was our Hike Europe trip. And I was on the first departure. Often we send senior staff on first departures. And I was on the first departure of it. So they were cutting edge for that. And again, I like outdoorsy. I like mountains a lot. I like hiking. And that trip also it was a little bit of a smaller group, kind of like yours. And they really got to know each other because they were hiking up and down mountains all day together. So lots to talk about and lots to get to know. And it was funny when I saw your picture with Lauren in Miami. I still get pictures I still have an active WhatsApp group from that crew, and they still meet up and see each other and have also traveled together on other tours.
That is awesome. Yeah, I
Yeah.
saw that after that trip, a few people had been posting about how they're doing the hike. Where was it? It's the one that in the US, in the mountains
Oh,
that we
the national parks tour,
in
or
there was another one.
there's a Canadian rock in North America. We have the U.S. national parks. We have the Canadian Rockies tour, and then we have Hawaii. Those are the three we have. And then we've got Patagonia, which is
I
obviously in
think it
South
was
America.
Patagonia.
I
Okay,
think a
then it's
couple people
Patagonia. Fine.
were
Yeah.
interested in Patagonia. Yeah,
Yeah,
that'll be phenomenal.
yeah, a few people did that one. Somebody did Greece, but like 2 weeks after I would have gone. And it's just super cool to see all of us kind of like reconnecting here and there. I know do you remember Mo?
Yep. Yeah, of course.
We all still talk. He's
Good.
gonna come to like my 21st.
Oh, that's great.
I plan on doing it like in Vegas. I'm like, you're coming, and he's like, okay. I'm like, great.
He will
You have
totally show up.
Oh, yes, of course. He was trying to make the excuse with work because he typically has to like work elections around
Yep.
like that time.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, listen, it's not going to be an election year.
Right.
It's my birthday's November 6th, so it's always typically election day falls on that day.
Right.
And I'm like, you have no excuse this time.
Right.
Come and see me and we have to celebrate. But thank you so much for your
Yeah,
time
you're
today.
welcome.
Um, I'm going to talk a little bit, the THM program. It's been around for several years now. They have finally added on the THM minor, which is what I am a part of.
Right.
We have classes in destination management, event planning, food and service design and delivery, trends and stats and tourism. So plenty of different options for students as well.
Awesome.
Again, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let me know how your rest of your class goes. And yeah, I look forward to keeping in touch.
Awesome.
And
Thank you so much.
I'll send you the recording.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Solana.